and welcome to the next episode of Exclusive, the podcast produced by PaperStreet Web Design and Marketing. As always, I'm your host, Nancy, our Client Relations Manager, and today I'm joined by our Vice President and Internet Marketing Director, Alex.
Hello.
As well as our SEO Manager, David.
Hi.
Judging by who my guests are, you might assume that our topic is going to be SEO today, and that's right, you would be correct. We've done SEO before in some of our talks and our podcasts in discussing how SEO works and things like that. But this episode is going to be more about SEO planning and SEO considerations. Most importantly, what to consider for your SEO budget. When you talk to any of us at PaperStreet, you'll always hear about why we say SEO is a great tool to get you ranking on Google and Bing and why it helps you bring in clients, especially if you're a law firm. But that said, sometimes the price tag is just a little disconcerting for our clients because they're not sure what's involved, what do you need for SEO, and things like that. So for this podcast episode, we're going to discuss everything that you need for your campaign, what you can keep in mind with your costs, as well as some of the cost-saving tips and what is a good use of how to spend your money. So with that, we'll dive right in and do a quick summary. Alex, how do you set the initial SEO budget?
Well, there's a lot of factors that come into play when you're talking about SEO. I think it's important to take a really big step back, and the whole purpose of SEO is to define that you are the quintessential leader in your practice area. And so it's really an answer of how do you define that? How do you prove that you are that quintessential leader? So the ways that Google wants to see that, and all the search engines out there want to see that, is they want to see that you have the relevancy, which means you have relevant content and information on your site that specifically says you are who you say that you are, and you do what you say that you do. And then you need the power, and the power comes from the link building side of building really authoritative backlinks that lead back to your site. But within that, you obviously then need a very healthy website, and you need to make sure that everything is technically done properly, and that you need to make sure that the usability and the development is up to par and up to the compliance levels of what all the search engines want to see. And then last but not least, you have to consider the reporting side, the analysis side, the monthly consultation side, where you want to look at the progression of what's happening with a campaign, and then adjust and pivot accordingly based on the needs. This is almost verbatim why it's called organic search. You adapt organically for what the needs are of a campaign.
And so, okay, let's say you've done this, and it's important to caveat to have that you should make sure that your website is up to par before you actually start an SEO campaign. So check things like speed, check things like making sure that you don't have broken links and things like that. A good SEO will involve technical work, but just try to, before you begin to consider, well, should I do SEO? Should I plan? Make sure your website's fairly newly designed, it's still engaging, it's easy to navigate, and things like that. So we'll pretend that those costs have been handled. So then let's talk about what it's actually going to cost to run your SEO campaign. Now, this is not PaperStreet's numbers. You can Google this and you can search for it yourself. But believe it or not, the average SEO cost is between $2,500 and $7,500 per month. So really, the median cost is about $5,000 a month. And it's not uncommon for campaigns to be at least $10,000 a month, especially if you're bigger in a bigger city or you're doing something like personal injury.
Mhm.
Now, the reason how that cost comes into play is because it does depend on things like your geographic areas. For example, LA is one of our most competitive markets because there are a lot of personal injury lawyers in LA. And what are they doing? They're all competing to do what it is that you may be doing if it's personal injury. Thus, you have a lot of firms putting money into their content, putting money into their backlinks, trying to expand and reach out. And then it also comes down to their keywords. Are you searching for the really competitive keywords that everyone's investing in? Are you searching for auto accidents? Are you doing things like, truck accidents, which can be extremely lucrative if you land one, but yet they're very expensive to market for? Even it does depend, believe it or not, some people are like, oh, well, how competitive could estate planning be? It could be because it will depend on how many other people are searching for estate planning lawyers, how competitive it is, where are you located, and things like that. So we'll talk about some of these costs as we go on. But unfortunately, SEO is not something that's stable and going to stay at a certain price point. And what we mean by that is competition continues to increase. It doesn't have a race where people drop out of. People put more money into their content, more money into their link building. Search volumes continue to increase, things like that. So
Mhm.
you have to understand that SEO is ever changing and ever growing, and as such, your budget may be as well.
I think it's really important to take into consideration what I also had mentioned as far as the components that make up an SEO campaign, because taking all the factors that you just mentioned, that you literally just went over, if one thinks of any company, it doesn't matter what company, and you look at what that hourly rate is, it's essentially dividing up the time of all that we discussed and then basically breaking it down to how it fits into each segment. So, if you look at that budget, let's say it's that $5,000 median budget, a portion of that is going into the technical side. A portion of that is going into the development updates of your website. A big portion of that is probably going into the content. A big portion of that is going into the link building, et cetera, et cetera. A big portion is the reporting, the analysis, the consultation. So when you then divide that up and you start looking at where that money is essentially allocated towards, it makes sense at the price points that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and I just want
Exactly.
to
It
chime
is.
in. Yeah, sorry, chime in as well. Someone
No,
who
go for it.
actually does a lot of the hands-on keyword research. I've seen over the years, just the increase in search volume, which agencies are obviously picking up on the fact that more people are turning to the internet to get legal assistance, and therefore law firms are realizing there's just more potential for new clients out there. So that's just why SEO, just kind of the costs just continually rise, because more law firms are just trying to compete, which just kind of brings the overall cost up for anyone trying to kind of enter into that market, as a new law firm.
As client relations manager, a lot of clients will approach me and saying, "Well, we were number one for so many years, and then all of a sudden, we just dropped. How did that happen?" And it's exactly what everyone's saying. It's because your other competitors are investing in this. Somebody who just opened a practice, they may be devoting a ton of their money to getting that advertising out, that SEO up, and things like that. So a lot of companies that may have been word of mouth, or they were felt pretty secure in where they were in their rankings, and they didn't have an ongoing campaign. They come to me and they're like, and this is all of the things that we talk about.
I like to tell clients it's not that you dropped, it's that somebody overlapped you. It's not that you
Exactly.
lowered in rankings, it's that something rose above you.
Yeah, it's they're taking their foot pretty much off the gas. It's SEO is never really like a set it and forget it type of
Yeah, absolutely.
campaign. So that's probably what's happening in most of those instances.
Now, when we were talking about the individual costs associated with everything, I think people are perhaps the most surprised when it comes to paid links, because a lot of people are like, well, I'm going to pay for content, or I'm going to pay for my website. But then when we discuss things like you have to pay for some backlinks and things like that, or directory memberships, they're like, wait, what? What is this? Why do I need this? Alex, can you elaborate on this for us?
Absolutely. It's probably one of the biggest misconceptions of SEO, or what I think makes a relationship initially for anyone new to SEO. Think of it as like that snake oil, as they always talk about, or like where is this going and how is this money being spent? Um, I use analogies. Anybody that knows me knows I use analogies all the time, all day, every day. The analogy I use in this instance is, if you think of your campaign and you think of the content that you're adding to it as the size of, let's say, a rocket ship or a vehicle, uh, think of link building as the fuel, the gas that's going inside. And then think of the paid links that are, as you mentioned, not paying to be a part of something so that you can get a backlink, but it's paying for, as you mentioned, let's say it's like a Chamber of Commerce listing or a directory listing or something like similar to that, where there is a submission fee to be a part of that. Think of that as the high octane side of better quality fuel. And frankly, taking it outside of of an analogy perspective, Google looks at it from almost like an investment standpoint. when your competitors have invested in these high level paid links. Again, let's say it's a Chamber of Commerce listing or something like that, and they essentially see that your competitor has invested in this, but you have not. You're by default, as we just mentioned a few minutes ago, you're by default then taking your foot off the gas. You're by default then lower in that race. You're not keeping up. And so really SEO is very much about that. It's making sure that not only are you keeping up with your competitors, but you're doing better than your competitors. You're proactively getting ahead of them. And those paid link costs are directly associated with what we're talking about. It's not the only thing. I always tell our clients that I don't want to scare anyone off, that especially from PaperStreet's perspective, even in 2024 here, we've actually reassessed, re-looked at our link building strategies, and it's almost like we will recommend the paid link side, almost as late in the process as we can, or when someone is actively building links. But on the initial side, if there's a lapse or just a big gap between yourself and your competitors because those paid links are already there, you are almost put in a situation where you have to obtain those links. Again, I'll use another very quick analogy, but it's like a race. It's like a marathon, like a running race. And if you're starting that race and your competitors are that much further ahead of you, then unfortunately you might have to pay for those paid links, and that catches you up in the race. So that's essentially how paid links work, and why you might need them.
Just to clarify for our audience, because again, all three of us are very familiar with SEO, but what is the distinction? Why are not all links created equal, and why are some of the paid links more valuable than others? What is that key thing element that we're looking for? I know it's domain authority, but could we explain that to our listeners a little bit?
Sure. So every website itself has power. So whether or not, let's say it's a local restaurant or a local pizza place down the street from you and they have a website, that has power to it. But the higher quality that would make more sense to lead back to a law firm, or specifically to a practice, the more direct that is and the more value that is, the higher authority it has. So, if you were to look at, again, let's say something like, a Chamber of Commerce listing, or even anything that's what's considered to be what's called a local citation, things like Apple Maps or Google Maps or something like that. All of those links have really high domain authorities. And then if you get that to link back to your website, that passes some of that value to you. So the more quality links you get, along with the quantity of good valued links, the better that it is. So some of these paid links directly match up to that. Some of them are just super high domain authority. And again, if your competitors have invested in those and you have not, you essentially have to keep up, because, as I mentioned, Google sees them investing and not you.
Again, I think the paid links are what are the most of a surprise to our clients. But
Mhm.
let's just quickly break down the things that are a bit more, I think, intuitive when you're thinking about your SEO costs. So, Allison, David, let's talk about some of the other costs, both if you're going to use an agency, which we'll talk about in a second, or you're doing it yourself. What are the things we have to think about?
Sure. So I'll take the lead with this, but because I want to briefly say that any good reputable SEO firm will be as transparent as possible, and that there shouldn't be hidden costs. There really shouldn't be anything that outside of what would essentially be the norm. Again, all that we talked about in the beginning portion of this conversation outlined where that money is distributed. So there really shouldn't be that many additional costs at all, aside from what we already have discussed. That said, some of the things that we're about to talk about are things that would be, necessary, or the improvements, but really has to do with the actual value of your website itself, which then is the foundation for which your campaign is going to be built upon. So, David can more specifically talk about some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you are going to be doing a full SEO campaign on your own, you definitely, one of the kind of overlooked factors is actually who's hosting your website. There is like a huge range of companies out there that offer hosting somewhere as cheap as $5 upwards to, $100, $150 a month. And clients sometimes want to go the cheap route, but you actually, hosting is actually very, very important because if you're on a cheap host, you're actually sharing your server space with thousands, possibly more other websites. So you do not have the dedicated resources that you need for your website to perform quickly. So we definitely, just recommend not cheaping out on hosting fees, even though it might be attractive to go with a cheaper host. Like sometimes like GoDaddy offers like very, very cheap rates, but you honestly kind of like everything in life, you get what you pay for. Uh, Other things to kind of consider are, if you do not have like a brand new website, there's possibility that, we, as an SEO team might review it for updates, regarding like usability updates. Is, the menu allow for easy access to important pages? Does the website is it optimized for conversions? Is there call to actions that are, driving visitors to the contact page to, reach out and contact you? Is your website mobile friendly? Does your website load quickly on all devices? So these are definitely some potential costs you should, consider if you are, trying to, start your own SEO campaign, on your own.
To weigh in on some of those too, um, I think it's really important. It's almost like a Venn diagram, right? So there really shouldn't be additional costs that are associated, but as everything that David just mentioned, those are necessary because of having the website itself. So, point being is like, would you have a website that would be like, it would obviously have to be hosted somewhere, but to the quality of the service and the dependability is a huge factor. It actually gets down to the semantic points of decimals in the reliability of uptime. So, again, one of the things that people will look at is like a 99.99% uptime. Things like that matter. And that basically means, as David was saying, that there could be server glitches. There could be, the servers that go down. That then means your website goes down. That then means that like contact forms could go down, or the way that somebody could get in touch with you goes down. So, I mean, all of those things really matter. And like David perfectly summarized, it's like anything in life, you kind of get what you pay for from that perspective. The conversion side, again, same thing, and the usability level to expand upon what David was mentioning. You know, would most websites work? Yeah, maybe, sure, but it's like anything. It's, you don't want to do it in vain. You don't want to launch and invest a huge amount of money into a SEO campaign only to then have people get led to the website and get frustrated because they can't find what they need, or there's no way to get in touch with the firm, or they don't know how to get to the content, or so again, it's very much like a Venn diagram, because it's not directly a cost that's part of SEO, but it should be an upfront foundation cost, is probably the best way to think of it.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. It's almost like, if you were like a brick and mortar store, like marketing, and somebody comes into your store and it's just like a complete mess. They can't find, the aisles are not organized. It's like, it's the same thing with their website. You're spending marketing dollars, bringing traffic into your website, quote unquote, like your store. And, people can't navigate, they get frustrated, leave.
Yeah.
So it's a waste. Yeah.
The other things
But
I
on,
think to consider with it, and these are not, again, I think it also depends on the reputation, or how upstanding, I guess is the word is that I'm looking for, that the firm is that you're working with. We at PaperStreet include SEO content writing to be a part of the campaigns that we work on. But there might be those times where additional content is needed. Let's say it's a site that has almost next to no content at all. It hits that point of, diminishing return, if you will, where you're looking at it to say, you need a substantial amount of content. And, how is that approached and how is that tackled? Again, there's a lot of ways that I think on, which Nancy definitely knows, on not only helping out on the SEO content side, but also on a client relation side, how, you might want to expand upon the content and how that actually can build out. And do you make it as part of the campaign? Do you do it monthly? Do you pay upfront and then maybe do a little bit more, and then you don't want to have to worry about it doing monthly? There's a whole bunch of variances like that, but I think again it's very situational, because if you've had a site, if it has a substantial amount of information already, then it's almost a moot point. It's something that you don't necessarily have to worry about. But if you're starting off from ground zero and have absolutely nothing, it may be something that has to be considered.
Content is a topic that's nearest and dearest to my heart. I could probably talk for 3 hours about SEO content, and nobody wants that. But what I will say is that, a lot of times the law firms will come to us and say, yeah, we have content on our website. It's great. But there are two factors that really have to, and I would love to go into all of them. Let's say three of the factors that you need to consider with setting up the initial content on your site, and what you would need to do if you're not writing the content yourself, you're doing SEO yourself, things like that. But first and foremost is Google requires a certain length. So if your content is like 250 words about how you're going to write a will, it's not going to show up on Google. You have to hit certain parameters. And nowadays we're looking at like 2,000 words a page for what is going to substantially rank in terms of content. And when you're looking at those 2,000 words, it can't be legalese mumbo jumbo. It's got to be easy readability. It's got to be formatted a certain way. It's got to have headings. It's got to have insertion of the keywords. It's going to have things like FAQs built within it. So not all content is created equal. So being surprised, well, I have content, what's wrong with it? You're going to need all of this. It's got to be readable. It's got to be formatted. You're going to have the hidden content that you don't even think about. Title tags, meta descriptions, things like that that you may not have written into your site. But then another important consideration is that a general rule of thumb with your content, and again, I'll try to keep this brief, is you're going to need content for each of your keywords. So sometimes, like for example, I hate to harp on personal injury a lot, but we'll go with personal injury because that's a lot of times the initial clients who come to us looking for SEO is that, like, I want car and truck accidents and motorcycle accidents, and they have one all-encompassing page for everything. Now, in a lawyer's mind, it's all personal injury, it's all the same thing, but not to Google and not to your clients. So your keywords may be car accident lawyer, motorcycle accident lawyer, truck accident. And in turn, all of those pages are going to need content. So, like I said, with PaperStreet, when you sign up with SEO for us, we include content to get you back where you need to be for that. But if you're doing this yourself, you're going to need to think about how you're getting that content. Or if an agency doesn't offer that, you may have to go elsewhere to do all of that. So that's my 2 second spiel on content before we move on to a very important element. But like I said, that's why SEO content could be a surprise cost, because you may think you have it, but it's not what SEO content needs to be.
Yeah, one other
So,
item that
I'm
I
sorry.
thought of that someone might want to consider, but again, it's not necessary, not mandatory. It is definitively not, something that is like should be considered even like a foundation cost. But a lot of our clients do consider the paid side, paid ads, and the reason they do that is, again, if you think of the marathon aspect that I mentioned, think of paid as like a sprint, or maybe a better analogy that I often say is, if you think of SEO as an oven, think of paid as like a microwave where it can basically stop and start and, kind of do the job that needs to be done almost immediately. And just as we all know, sometimes you don't want to just rely on a microwave for all of your cooking. So it's the same way, it's the same analogy. So a lot of our clients will consider paid to help with that lead generation on the onset of a campaign, because it helps kind of that boost of bringing in clients, helping on the ROI perspective, bringing that traffic in, and then being able to take the funds that are they're getting and the leads that they're getting to then reallocate it to help support an SEO campaign. The irony and the great thing about it is usually it ends up being so successful on the paid side that they think, well, why pause this lead generator? I'll just keep both things going then. So, but it really does help, kind of that initial boost, especially if you have not, if you're starting out from ground zero, if you have not, worked on a campaign before. So again, not necessary. It's not mandatory. It's not, but it's something that is maybe to consider from like an additional cost perspective if somebody's considering that.
Yeah, we'll bring
Yeah,
up the discussion of pay-per-click too, because like I said, we're going to compare pay-per-click and SEO together. But we do have to move on. And one of the important things is that we've talked about a lot is we've been talking about agencies versus doing it yourself. And I can't tell you how many times, again, as client relation manager, and I'm Alex, I'm sure you hear the same thing too. Clients are hesitant to sign because they're like, I had a bad experience with an SEO agency. In reality, SEO is best managed likely with an agency because the agency should have the ability to do things like your content, like finding the ads for you, being able to look for the technical mistakes, being able to do keyword research, things like that. SEO is a lot of moving parts. It's not something that you could say, I'll do an hour, 1 or 2 days a week, and I'll be in great shape with SEO. SEO takes time, it requires a lot of manpower. So if that's the only reason to use an agency because you simply don't have the time, then that's a great reason to use an agency. So, but the thing is that, especially with agencies, the thing is that you need to vet them. You need to talk to them about what aspects of SEO are you going to do for me? Because I can't tell you how many clients have come to me where they hired this SEO agency and all they were doing was getting backlinks. But then when I go to look at them, I'm like, you don't have any content on your site. You weren't going to rank. Or I don't see where you're practicing law, and your keyword location is a huge part of where you're going to rank. So make sure that if you do go with an agency, like I said, we always hope it's going to be PaperStreet. But again, agencies will save you time. Agencies will know more about the tricks. And agencies will have the ability to analyze and discuss data with you that you may not have the ability to look at. So when you're hiring an agency, again, we hope it's PaperStreet, but when you're hiring any agency, ask them how they present their findings to you. Ask them where your money is being allocated. Like we've already talked about. Is it content? Is it technical? Is it link building? Where is it going? Or have they worked on law firms before? Because ranking for a pizza place is definitely not the same as ranking for a law firm. Because it's not going to be about the gimmicks and things like that. Your links are going to be more narrow. They're going to have an understanding of what directories are best for law and things like that. Do they have any client testimonials? Do they have any rankings that they can show with you? Things like that. Is there a cost per month analysis? Things like that really have to be available to you. And if they are, then by all means, yes, you're probably going to need an agency. Again, we're going to talk about how to do some money saving SEO tips in a few minutes about how if you really can't afford a full agency, what you can do to support yourself on these smaller efforts. But like I said, the agency is going to do a lot of this for you. But make sure it's not Joe Schmo who's doing this for like 2 years in his basement. Try to find a team that's been doing it for a long time, has the reputation, has additional marketing options. And like I said, we're going to talk about pay-per-click in 1 second, but there are other ways to boost your SEO that may be involving more creative uses of marketing. Maybe we're going to enhance it with some social media. Maybe we're going to enhance it with, special imagery and or videos. So, like I said, try to think about before you poo-poo the cost of an agency, think about what that agency can do for your campaign in terms of where your money is going.
Yeah, and I just want to say one more thing. I mean, I know at PaperStreet here, we definitely pride ourselves on transparency. So if you're ever, vetting an agency and they're just, something's just kind of rubbing you the wrong way, they're not transparent about just their process and how, they go about things that, it's definitely should be a red flag in your mind. So definitely be careful. Like, as Nancy kind of alluded to, being burned by SEO agencies, just like we mentioned with hosting, there's a wide variety of costs. There's very cheap vendors out there, but you get what you pay for. They could be using, offshore teams, getting you, poor quality backlinks. And honestly, you're going to be you're setting yourself back even further by going with, a cheap agency. So definitely something to kind of be aware of out there. Or anyone promising as well, like guaranteeing like, top rankings, things like that. And Google even has like, yeah, a lot of, just kind of things to be aware of when SEO agencies are kind of reaching out to you. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually, we wrote a blog post about that discussing SEO spam and things like that. A lot of times people hide behind numbers and data when they're soliciting SEO, but then they don't have anything to back it up. They'll pick very isolated instances that they're talking about, but then what is the big picture? And that's exactly what these agencies will do. Well, look, we got you 400 backlinks. Well, you're a law firm and your backlink is from like the shoe salesman two towns over. That's not a real backlink. That's not actually going to grow you. So again, there were a lot of false promises were made by SEO agencies. I'd say SEO and social media agencies are the two biggest scams that I see on a day-to-day basis. So like I said, an agency is really a great way to go, but you do have to do your homework to find one.
And I also just wrote a blog post just specifically about this. And yeah, it really does boil down to what you both just mentioned. You know, team size, the dedicated experience and the transparency behind it is exactly it. And like we said, just like you were just mentioning right now, Nancy, be smart about what don't be allured, don't be, attracted to the allure of any sort of promises or it's really all about, going down to the specifics. Again, I have had countless instances where I hear from other agencies or I hear about another agency almost redirecting, forcing where it would hit their objectives, but it ultimately isn't the objective of the firm. So, like for example, let's say somebody is a statewide campaign and yet they're talking about how you're not ranking in a local market and how they can get you ranked in the local market. That is not the objective of the firm. The objective of the firm is statewide. Stay focused. Make sure that if you are even considering somebody, that you're grilling them and, speaking to them about what your objectives are, not what their objectives are.
And I have to chime in there too, Alex, because you raised a really great point about the location and things like that too. A firm who promises the moon is not likely going to be able to follow through on that. If you're a small town lawyer and let's say, you're in Alabama and you're 30 miles out from Birmingham, the chances of you ranking statewide with a very small budget are slim to none because Google is going to consider things like where you're located and things like that. So a lot of times when these agencies make these kinds of promises, you have to just kind of step back and say, well, is it likely I'm going to be a top ranking Birmingham firm when my office is 30 miles away and I'm spending like $2,000 a month? So these promises really can get out of hand and they're just simply not realistic. So you have to have a firm that can set you on a path to grow. And I always use this example when I talk to our clients, but Alex and David, you know this client well. We have a client who started out with a very small employment law firm in Baltimore, and that was his SEO campaign. And then it became a Maryland SEO campaign. And then it became a Maryland and DC campaign. And now we're looking at places across the East Coast. So again, you can easily grow with your SEO campaign. And there are steps that you're going to need to take to reach those goals. But promising like covering the Eastern Seaboard, promising a national campaign, things like that right away, not very realistic. And things that should be very big warning signs that go off in your head if your agency's promising you those kinds of promises, because it's just not realistic.
Hmm?
Now, another important element that we need to consider, because agencies will fly this around too, and a lot of times, sometimes they pick it because it's easier. But let's look at SEO and pay-per-click together. Alex, is pay-per-click cheaper? Is SEO quicker? Should you do both? Should you do one? If you're budgeting, what do you need to think about with the pay-per-click versus SEO debate?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, there are benefits. I mean, huge benefits to doing both. I mean, it's essentially diversifying your marketing, so it's not putting all your eggs in one basket. So if budget does permit and, you can consider both, then that is something that we do recommend. But if you are, thinking about it from the long term versus the short term, that's really, where we still guide all of our clients where again most data will always still support the fact that even though the major search engine out there they want to push their sponsored ads and the paid side, that's what candidly makes them billion-dollar companies, but statistically you will see and find that the organic traffic is still what most users click on, still to this day. So it is a longer term investment, but going back to all that we mentioned, it's a long haul. It's use whatever analogy, pick whatever one you want that I use. It's either a marathon, so it's a marathon versus a sprint, or an oven versus a microwave. SEO organic search is going to get the results, the top page results, provided you're going with a good team and they know what they're doing. But it's a long haul. It's a long investment. It's a long time investment. The paid side is a lot quicker. Costs, that's tough to answer because it varies drastically, as you mentioned and alluded to earlier. If you're in LA and you're going after personal injury, your pay-per-click cost could be exponentially higher than organic. I mean, it makes organic almost seem like pocket change compared to what it would be. So, I mean, the cost can vary drastically. To your point, though, is what, the fictitious example that you just mentioned of a firm outside of Birmingham that's like 30 miles out into the country of or into the state of Alabama. The cost there might be nominal, and they might be, minimal cost that then, is akin to organic campaign. And again, that's where then it becomes like that debate of going, well, maybe I do both. Maybe I get them both set up and running because it's not that big of an expense. So it really, just like any smart business owner would do, it's a cost benefit analysis. It's looking at what that exposure of those ads would be. Again, any good firm that's quoting out paid will tell you the estimated conversions, the estimated leads, and potential new clients that you're then going to be obtaining from that. And it's just then simple math. It's basically saying, well, here's my expense, here's the potential return, here's, is this worth doing it? But again, as I alluded to with the first point, the just like all of us, I'll go back to my my cooking analogy. We all seem to get much better meals out of an oven than we do out of a microwave. I'll just summarize it with that. So
Yeah, and just
What
kind of
else?
as
Oh,
you
I'm sorry. Go
mentioned
ahead,
about
David.
the return, yeah, I feel like, I mean, with any marketing campaign, tracking your return on investment is, is just, it's a huge portion of it. But especially I think with pay-per-click, where you're, literally paying per click, per conversion, it's definitely something that you want to have a really robust tracking reporting system set up so that you can kind of, match up one-to-one. Hey, this, this client converted from pay-per-click and they, amounted to, this kind of case. And if, you find that the quality of your pay-per-click conversions is just not amounting to what you want, then, that definitely can kind of, steer you, in a direction that this may not be, the correct, marketing avenue for your firm.
yeah, that's a great point on the again, the transparency side or working on the team expertise side. Again, back to the point that we were just talking about of like using an agency. One of the principal models that we follow on our management of a paid campaign is exactly what David said. We will be the first to look at, let's say, one campaign that's then divvied up into multiple different ad groups or different campaigns actually. And if there's one that's essentially not converting and not doing well and not, but you're putting funds into that, that's part of where that management comes from. It's stop that campaign, save the funds, save the budget, return that back to the firm, because you can then analytically see where that return is coming from. So
Or
it's,
invest, yeah, or like
yeah,
invest where the what ad groups are, performing well, getting you the
exactly.
type of potential new clients you're looking
Yep.
for. So
Yeah,
yeah, like just making smart decisions on, where to put those
precisely.
advertising dollars into.
Yeah, precisely. It's like either funnel it back to the firm or reallocate it into the campaigns that maybe might be limited by budget or something. So yeah, put it into what's working.
One little note about before we move on about why you might want to consider both in terms of pay-per-click and SEO is pay-per-click it does very well with the immediate claims. So for example, if you're an estate planning client, if somebody needs a probate lawyer and you have an ad for your probate lawyer, they're going to click, you popped up, great opportunity with pay-per-click, especially if it's within the budget. That being said, SEO tends to work on not just that immediacy, but the long tail keywords, the longer searches where somebody may not have even known they needed a lawyer or they may be in the researching stage. And then your article or your content was there and it appeared and they realized, yes, I should hire this law firm. You were helpful. I'm going to do that. So, like, let's say you have the ad for your actual probate lawyer, but then let's say you're an estate planning firm and you decide to write a blog post about what happens if I die without a will and I own a business. So you with an SEO campaign, you might have written that content, you might have inserted your content, you might have inserted internal links and things like that. Your probate ads are not touching your estate planning, your will creation and things like that. SEO campaigns tend to be more of a whole. So when you're doing that, you might catch somebody who clicks for that, like dying without a will or what happens to my business or something like that, and you gained a client without planning for that ad to show up. So it's like extra clients that you can reach that just may simply not have been present in that ad by itself. So, like I said, it really is, certain firms where you may not realize all the extra content you could bring in, or extra clients, I should say, by having content and the backlinks. Because if you have content and backlinks that may make it an article that's particularly helpful appear, you could get someone to hire you before they even realized they needed that lawyer. So, like
Right.
I said, a lot of times there is really good merit to doing both. And it's something that you should discuss with whoever becomes your agency to plan. Maybe, okay, well, let's do this with pay per click and then let's do this with SEO so that we get the best bang for our buck in an overall campaign. So money is just coming in on all sides. So that's something to really consider.
Yeah.
And then Alex, we've talked a lot about time frames, in terms of SEO being an oven and microwaves, pay per click in terms of what's fast and what's not.
Mm.
But what time frames do these clients really just need to have in mind? Because a lot of times when we're talking SEO, for clients meeting with me the first time, they're like, okay, when are the phones going to start ringing? When are the phones going to start ringing, Alex?
That's the toughest question I think we get all the time. And it's, and I always say to everyone not to be able to give a very blunt answer because I almost take pride on the fact that I can give a direct answer pretty much to anything. But it's highly contingent on the market. It really is. I mean, like we said, we'll keep going on the analogies that came up, or not even the analogies, the examples that have come up. If you're in LA and you're going after personal injury, that is a phenomenally different market than if you're out in the rural country of Alabama, So, I mean, you again have to set your expectations based on where you are and how steep that competition is. I will say that we here at PaperStreet set our campaigns to, an annual campaign level, because, we set that expectation of making sure that it's going to take at least a year, more than likely, to rank contingent on where the market is. Now, that being said, like we just mentioned, if you're in a rural location, if you're not in a highly densely populated area, if you're going after a practice area that is, does not have the search volume, let's say, I don't know, I'm making a joke, but we've actually seen it. Let's say you're going after equestrian law or something like that, that's not anywhere near as fierce or competitive as something like personal injury or criminal defense or something. So the opportunities to then rank for that could be phenomenally quicker. So, again, I like to be upfront and transparent to tell all campaigns that, we set them for a year for a reason. But take all those other factors into consideration. If you're in a less competitive, easier market, you may rank considerably sooner. If your practice areas are not anywhere near as fierce or as competitive as something like personal injury or criminal defense, then you may rank considerably sooner.
Also, another factor to consider is like firms with like a a new venture, a brand new domain name starting out. I mean, you're literally starting out from scratch, in most ways. So if you're kind of splitting off from a law firm as a partner to kind of go and create your own, website, solo practitioner, you got to definitely keep that in mind as well, that, you're starting out, yep, from scratch. Your domain has no authority, no backlink. So that's definitely going to even take, it's a factor that's going to push out even longer to see results,
We'll go back to one.
especially.
We'll go back to one of my analogies again. I'll go back to the rocket analogy. If you have an active website and you're basically then just building upon it, that website has, whether you know it or not, has pretty much already created lift. It's already taken flight. To David's point, if it's a brand new venture, if it's a brand new domain, if it has zero backlinks, if it had no content on it whatsoever, that rocket is still on the ground. And getting it off the ground, as we all know from anyone that has watched any rocket ship take off, that is what is the hardest, biggest accomplishment to get lift, to get flight. That's what takes the longest. So just set those expectations is a great point. It's a wonderful point. So it's always just, again, this is where the transparency comes into play. It's, don't be, like I mentioned before, allured by the promises or we can do this and we can do that. It should be a very transparent and honest and blunt conversation to set expectations properly.
this comes a little bit like we're tooting PaperStreet's horn, but it's something that really, any agency that you're looking at should do something similar. Is
Yeah.
when you're thinking about your time frame, as Alex said, a good agency can't give you a time frame. I mean, and even if you Google like the trusted SEO authorities like SEMrush and things like SEO Journal, they're going to tell you the same numbers we are: 6 months, 12 months, things like that. But even when we're providing quotes to our clients or setting up their keywords and things like that, we'll tell them, well, to rank in your market, you need 500 backlinks and you have three. It's not meant to be an insult to the firm, but it's to set those expectations. The same thing, David's the keyword genius of PaperStreet. He'll tell you, okay, well, these are your phrases, but this is your keyword volume. So if your keyword volume is extraordinarily high, that's fine. But just realize that you're competing with all of that aggregate, all of that volume. So, like I said, it's not an agency saying, oh, we're not that good because we're telling you it's competitive. It's an agency that's being honest. We're telling you these are really tough to rank for, but we're going to do what it takes. But you got to understand the time frame. Or the
Yeah.
same thing with your backlinks. You're working with three compared to 500.
You
We
just
can't just, unless you want us to work all day, every day, 3 weeks nonstop, even then that might not be enough to catch you up. So,
yeah.
like I said, any good agency, if they're setting you up with that time, is going to give you some numbers or some insights. And again, they'll back up the quotes that, like I said, not just PaperStreet numbers saying it's 6 to 12 months, things like that. You can look up on any SEO true authority site and get the same answers.
Yeah, you actually just took the words right out of my mouth. I actually was going to use, and not to divulge any personal or client information. But yeah, that's exactly we've seen a case in point example verbatim where a competitor to a client that came to us, which was a brand new venture, has over 1,000 backlinks, and a huge percentage of them are paid. The client that came to us had 19. So that's exponentially different. So
And like I said, it's not a fault of the agency if they're giving you that information. It means they're showing you why it's difficult. Again, they may make sure they have success stories and things like that, the experience to back it up, but they're being truthful to you by saying, well, this is what the problem is.
right.
All right, so changing gears ever so slightly, but trying to keep our audience being helped and things like that. Let's say you are doing SEO on your own, or let's say you're choosing a partial SEO plan. Like, for example, PaperStreet has an SEO Essentials plan, which keeps the ground running, keeps you moving, keeps you shaking with some SEO, but it's not as comprehensive as a full SEO. If you've got one of these SEO light plans or you're doing it yourself, there are ways to supplement your campaign to help it along. And even if you have an agency, these are some things that you consider yourself and you can talk to the agency you're working with. Hey, I was thinking about doing this. What do you think? So, David, let's go into that a little bit about how we can talk about what are some money saving or cost saving options that you can do to help your SEO no matter what your situation you're in.
As you just kind of briefly mentioned before, I mean, I won't go in depth again, but yeah, writing your own content is definitely something that you can do to, help save money. Obviously, you're going to need to be paying an agency or another firm to be writing this content. But yeah, besides from that, there are also a number of free tools that you can use. First, starting out with keyword research. That's something that we mentioned. It's kind of like setting the trajectory of your campaign, figuring out what your users are searching for, how popular certain areas are, how competitive. And there are tools out there called Google's even keyword planner tool provides this information. So you can kind of set your geographic location to where you're looking to find search volume, enter in potential keywords, and it's going to go ahead and reply to you with that specific data on how often things are being searched for. There's also some other tools called like People Also Ask or Also Ask, and this is also helpful for generating blog posts or generating content ideas, because it's going to let you know what people are also asking in search engines related to overall topics. So, for example, personal injury, what type of compensation can I receive for personal injury? What's the statute of limitations for a personal injury? It's going to, pull out questions that people have already answered, people that have already asked in search results, and kind of give you insight into what people are looking for. So these are two really valuable tools that allow you to update your website in a way that's going to help you rank better in search. Some other tools we're looking at more on the technical side of things. We've got it's a Chrome extension called Mozbar, which allows you to kind of get insight into the content that's on the page. It really pulls out all of the kind of technical SEO elements for any web page that you're viewing to kind of just get further insight into what they're doing well. Pulls out, the headlines that are mentioned on the page, maybe the word count, things like that. So they kind of more for like a competitor analysis type, or even, grading your own content. So loading up your page with the Moz bar and seeing, how it judges that. Some other tools as well are Google Page Speed, or a tool called GT Metrics. These are both really helpful tools for judging how fast your website loads. So this kind of gives you, if you don't have an agency and you want to know, how does my website perform from a speed perspective, these tools can definitely give you some insight without having to, kind of hire a professional. I must say, in order to fix certain speed elements, you probably do need to hire a developer, but there are some basic speed updates that you can make on your site on your own. Getting into, there's also, as we kind of mentioned, for any SEO campaign, there is like the reporting and analysis. So there's 2 free tools called, Google Analytics and Google Search Console, which we set up for every single SEO campaign. And this just helps provide insight into, tracking the progression of your website from, a traffic conversion standpoint. So Google Analytics is going to provide all of that data about, visitors coming to your website, how long they stay on the site, how many pages that they view. You're able to get insight into just what are the most popular pages on your site, or the opposite, what pages have you invested a lot of time and money into but are not, being viewed at all, and kind of making some strategy adjustments to get those, in front of the eyes of the viewer. Also, Google Search Console, it does have an analytics section of there, but it also is almost like a one-to-one messaging system with Google itself, alerting you about things that have gone wrong with your website. Maybe a page is rejected from the index, or there was like a server error with your website. You get automatic notifications straight from Google Search Console. So if you're not working with an agency, highly recommend setting both of those up and reviewing them at least on like a monthly level. Last but not least, we've got ChatGPT or Gemini to help with just general SEO questions. It could almost be like asking an agency. You could straight up just ask these type of AI platforms for maybe some advice, and they're going to assist with that. And also using them maybe to leverage content, not necessarily having AI written content, but asking them to maybe outline, a page for you. What are some really good topics to include on a page, and then going ahead and kind of expanding upon that further. So these are all free tools that you can, kind of use to your advantage to help make, either get SEO insights or, get SEO recommendations on things to update on your website on your own.
Also,
I have
David,
nothing else to add.
yeah, I agree. David, you are, like I said, you're like our keyword guru. So, how would you explain to clients that
Yep.
maybe sometimes you can go after lower cost, or what we like to call low hanging fruit, to help increase your SEO but still being a little more cost effective?
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, Los Angeles, personal injury, that's obviously going to have extremely high competitiveness, extremely high search volume. But what you can try to do to go after more low-hanging fruit is really try to hone in on more niche areas, longer tail keywords, or even, as silly as it sounds, keywords that may not be reporting definitive search volume. So there are searches that could be potentially happening, but if they're not being searched an average of 10 times or more a month, the search volume tools are not going to register that. So really, it's not going out. It's kind of taking a look at what types of subsets can I be going after. So every law firm out there is probably trying to go after the bigger ticket items, are general car accident attorney or general truck accident attorney. But maybe you're going to focus in on a specific type of accident. We've seen that people do search for intersection accident, parking lot accident, side swipe, things like that. So honing in specifically on a particular subset, or just, and then there's usually less competition, less search volume, and then grow your way up. So at least you're, because when you're competing, for the big ticket phrases, you might be waiting, a year or two to even show up in search results. So this allows you, when you target, more niche subsets, to kind of just an easier path to the top, usually less competition because, these firms are really focusing on the bigger ticket items and kind of forgetting about, some of these more kind of subsets that could also, people are also searching for. So,
I always bring up this example because it's the truth, but I had been when I was on the SEO side of things, I was talking to one of our clients about this, when they were big workers' comp, things like that. And what had happened was is they wrote an article about really great hand what to do if you injure your hand in a workers' comp injury claim. And what happened was is because it's that low hanging fruit, they wrote a really great article about it. It jumped them up right to the top. They were ranking number one with these hand injuries. And that article alone, one article about hand injuries, brought them in three clients within like 1 month. So it may not have seemed like, oh, I'm going to go after a hand injury claim. And let's be real, that could get you a lot of spam claims, but it's a goal that's worth trying. It's just testing because, like I said, they got three perfectly legitimate hand injury claims. That's certainly going to help pay the bills, but based off of that lower hanging fruit. So instead of truck accident claim, truck accident claim, truck accident claim, they just thought, okay, let's write a really good article about hand injuries. And that was enough to bring in three clients. So, like I
yeah,
said, we see that things like that happen a lot. So, like I said, what David's saying is
yeah.
definitely something we see, and it's definitely a worthwhile adventure on your own.
Yeah, even there's just been some really niche like medical malpractice cases I've heard from a client about things that go wrong with maybe like an IV extraction, and there's actually no keyword sought after, like definitive volume, but the client, these are such valuable cases to the client that even if one person, finds them, in a month, it's, highly worth it to the firm. So definitely, search volume is obviously something to that's attractive, but it's not everything. You got to kind of look at everything in the context.
I think another point to add on just very quickly to that is when something is like really new too. We've had instances where it's a client that comes to us who is like extremely innovative and really on the cusp of what's latest and greatest. There isn't going to be any search volume for it if it's that new.
Yeah.
So, but yet if you know that it's a good, viable, decent case that has like really high potential, lead generation from it, then it's worth targeting. It's worth potentially going after it for that reason.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'll just say one more thing is that, yeah, it takes keyword research tools about a month or two to kind of catch up and populate those, that search volume data. So yeah, a lot of times, mass torts, new things kind of come to the front. The FDA is now, recalling a certain product, and we'll go and look for, are people looking for attorneys, for this certain type of product right away. And, we're not seeing those searches immediately, but usually within, a few months, once the data populates, we, see that happening.
Then another thing we've talked a lot about is backlink building. But Alex, how can a client get some of their own backlinks? What are some things that they can do to help support those efforts?
Sure. So, I mean, one of the first things that we always, recommend is actually, and a lot of the stuff as David alluded to, looking at Google Search Console, that'll give you, you can see the links that are associated and pointed back to your site. And then from there, there are tools that are out there, some of which, again, David mentioned, SEMrush, SEMrush, Ahrefs. Even if you don't or do a trial version of it, you can do competitor analysis. You can see what links your competitors might have that you then don't have. There are, again, even if you're relying on Chat GPT or Gemini, you could probably find out what are like top tier links to obtain within the legal industry. There's probably the standard ones that everyone would know about that are regionally specific based on where you are and where you're located. There's probably then very client specific, meaning like if that's not just based on the region, but based on your practice area. And then a lot of times it's just there might be like article publications that are out there or guest opportunities or guest posting opportunities, things like that where you can get involved. And there's forum items that can be answered. The problem with that, to be very transparent and clear about it, it's usually about the timeliness. It's you need to act not only quickly but super quickly. Like you need to be first on there. And if you're not, then it's generally not worth doing it. And even like we're doing right now, you can appear on podcasts. It's that peer-to-peer relationship. It's this is also where social media also can play in quite a bit. Those are all really good, reputable, good quality backlinks that come in from setting up LinkedIn profiles or Facebook profiles and having them point back to your website. And then it obviously helps with the engagement or the networking side and the sharing side, the human aspect of like the community involvement, if you will. The human side of it all. And then, like I mentioned, the guest writing opportunities that are out there where you can find opportunities, and there might be publications that are looking for an author or looking for someone to like publish something on their site and then have a backlink back. So those are all ways, and really kind of goes in depth, like down the rabbit hole of link building. Those all could be done on your own, but as that just sounds, it takes a lot of time. That kind of alludes back to like what Nancy mentioned earlier, where it's kind of the reliance of a design firm or an agency to kind of help you with that, simply not only because of their expertise of knowing where to look, so there's less research, they almost can kind of go directly to the source, but then obviously having the expertise to just get those links as quickly as possible, it just makes it that much quicker. So.
All right, and we're getting close to the hour mark, so we want to make sure we quickly get some last minute tips in there for you. But sometimes with going with SEO, a lot of times you focus on content, you focus on backlinks. But as Alex was just saying, it's the added bonuses that can assist with your SEO efforts. So, David, so let's talk about some multimedia efforts as a whole, things like videos, podcasts, infographics. Are there good ways to use these for SEO?
Yeah, absolutely. And these are definitely things, I mean, as you can see what we're doing right here, you can do these on your own. You don't necessarily need to hire a professional videographer to make this happen. I mean, I feel like any relatively new phone has really high resolution cameras on there. So you can go ahead and go to maybe have a professional background setting, dress professionally, and basically film your own videos, start your own YouTube channel. A great resources to just what are questions that your clients frequently ask you. Those are great talking points to just make videos, or even an entire podcast about that. Even maybe reach out to a fellow attorney to have them on as a guest to kind of both discuss your just experiences in the legal industry. So yeah, you can definitely do a lot of filming of videos, podcasts on your own. There's also like really, user-friendly, easy software editing programs out there to, kind of do some quick editing if there's anything you want to kind of cut out of your video. So yeah, I mean, definitely there's great resources out there as well where you can post your videos for free on YouTube, post your podcast for free on various channels as well. And then infographics as well. There's a great tool called Canva, which allows you to create a great infographic that will add a visual element to your page. So let's say you have a really long practice area page, you can create a nice visual element that calls out certain statistics, or just kind of helps break up the content and just helps with user engagement to kind of incorporate some visual elements and not just see only text. So these are definitely some ways to and further enhance your site.
Yeah, and I think all of these, I mean, fundamentally, as you mentioned, Nancy, to kind of wrap up on the hour point here, but we really summarize this to kind of, as David is mentioning perfectly, it's all about the client commitment, meaning the firm's commitment. There are so many different tactics. There's the webinars, there's the podcast, there's also like the community involvement side, there's the events, there's sponsorships, there's charitable events that the firm can be a part of that then gets backlinks. There's things like we can do, like even just looking up trends or other applications that are out there that are free, like Spark Toro is one, where you can put information in to kind of find out what you should be looking up, or like hashtag trends that might be out there. Firm victories is a huge one that seems to why not tout yourself like in the firm's wins, and especially if anything and everything that is new or noteworthy, that especially if it's public information, if it gets filed to kind of a standard where it takes out all ambiguity of client information, attorney-client information, but you could tout that case victory, things like that, where it's
Press
really
release.
about the involvement of the firm, to then help kind of leverage and invest in yourself. Those are all really good opportunities to do on your own as well.
And what
Yeah.
we'll say to wrap all of this up too is, what you should do is, even if you have an agency, there are tools out there that are some really great SEO programs and things like that. There's things like Udemy, which offer you SEO courses, or you could Google things like Search Engine Journal, Search Engine Marketing, and they'll have some really helpful information things there. Moz is another great resource. And if you do trust an agency, we still recommend that you do these educational tools, because that way you know what questions to ask your agency. Understand that what you learned in a Udemy course is not comparable necessarily to 6 years of experience or anything like that, but at least it gives you the mindset of you know what to look for. Or if you're going to help write some of your own content, it's great if you could do some courses on Udemy or read some articles to figure out how that content should look. Your agency or your editor can still go by and tweak it, but it's an easier vibe for what SEO
Yeah.
needs to do. So, like I said, and a lot of these courses, things like Udemy has sales where it's like $20, or you could research Search Engine Journal and find some articles there, like things like that. So you can yourself just have enough of a mindset that you learned what you needed to do to understand what your agency is doing for you, and then have an open communication. Well, I was thinking about writing an article. Is that a good idea? I was thinking of making this infographic. How should I structure it? Things like that. And if you have that background information, it'll help your efforts combined with your agency's efforts even further.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
mean,
thank you to David and
yeah,
Alex. I
yeah,
really
absolutely.
appreciate your insight. I know that we work really well as a team together, and we probably could have gone on for about 3 more hours, but hopefully this hour was great for our listeners. It gave them some great food for thought about how to plan their budget and what they should be spending on for SEO. So
Yeah,
thanks to you both, and thanks to our audience. Tune in next time for the next episode of Exclusive. Bye,
yeah, thank you.
everybody.
Thanks for having us.